Welcome to Synergita Talentcast. I'm Raghu, Head of Global Marketing in Synergita. Today we have a special guest, Paul Niven. Paul Niven is a management consultant, author, OKR coach, and noted speaker on the subjects of strategy execution, objectives and key results, and balanced scorecard. As both a practitioner and consultant, he has developed a successful strategy executing systems for clients large and small in wide variety of organizations, including 14,000 companies, public sector, and non-profit agencies. Paul is the founder of both OKRstraining.com and the Synergita Group. The companies have assisted more than 500 organizations across the globe effectively in executing their strategy. His most recent book, co-written with Ben Lamort, is Objectives and Key Results, Driving Focus, Alignment, and Engagement with OKRs. Welcome, Paul. Thanks for coming. It's great having you here.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Raghu. Thank you so much for having me.
Great. It's now I'm going to ask the obvious question with the whole pandemic that's been happening last 1.5 years. Do you see there's a change and that maybe there's a more need for OKR in the current landscape?
Yeah, I think what's interesting right now is you could see I'm at a room in my house here. So there's so many things changing since the pandemic. One of the big challenges that we're all going to have to grapple with is what does the future of work look like? Is it going to be all remote? I doubt that. Is it going to be all back at the office? I doubt that. It's probably going to be some form of hybrid work. And from the research that I've read, and of course, just speaking from all of our clients around the globe, what they're most concerned about is, how do you unite people around a common purpose if they're in disparate locations? So if we're not all in the office having those spontaneous conversations, how do you make sure we're aligned? And of course, OKRs, when done well, that's a terrific aspect of the model. It really does unite people around a common purpose because you've got to develop OKRs that signal your contribution to strategy. So it's a great way for teams to come together. So I think regardless of what direction the future of work goes to, I think we're going to see more and more organizations adopting OKRs because, again, it helps unite employees and teams around a common purpose.
And do you think there's a realization in companies that OKR is going to be even more important now with the distributed workforce, virtual onboarding happening everywhere, and it's not easy to even get employees buy into the company culture because it's all virtual. So do you think OKR is going to enable all these processes?
Yeah, I think there's we talked about kind of the future of work, but that's kind of a big challenge organizations have to face. On the positive side, I split my time between the United States and Canada, so I know a lot about those two countries, not other countries in the world. But of course, there's been so much pent-up demand here after the pandemic, and vaccination rates are very high. The U.S. economy, of course, is very, very strong. And so organizations want to take advantage of that, which means growing. And in fact, it's interesting, Raghu, in my research, I've discovered that 90% of all strategic plans have some reference to growth. Everybody wants to grow. And now especially is a tremendous time for growth. But what tends to impede growth in most companies is a lack of focus. So again, I think this is another reason post-pandemic we're going to see even more interest in OKRs because, again, when done well, I keep using that caveat, when done well, OKRs can really ensure that you focus on what matters most to executing your strategy right now. So I think when you look at the factors in the world right now, the future of work, whether it's that hybrid model that we talked about, you look at companies that are seeing all this demand now as economies around the world are revving back up to pre-pandemic levels, they need to focus. OKRs can help with that. So I think the future is bright for the world of OKRs.
And we usually talk OKR from company goals, company objectives. Now, from the teams and individual employees' perspective, how is that going to enable them, or how is them make them be more productive? Is there a kind of, any data that suggests that?
Yeah, it's interesting here. I'll back up a little bit on that question and go a very, very meta level here. Why do people work? And of course, everybody wants a paycheck. Fair compensation is crucial. I mean, I charge my clients for our services. That's really important. But all of the data, and this goes back decades, suggests that people want meaning and purpose in their work. That's really important. And what's interesting, there's a professor at Harvard University named Teresa Mobley, whose work I follow. She wrote a terrific book a few years ago called The Progress Principle. And in that book, she talks about, what does it take to improve employees' motivation and engagement during the workday? She's done, again, decades of study on this. And what she has determined is that the single biggest thing you can do to boost employees' motivation and engagement during the workday is give people the chance to show progress on meaningful work. Just think about that for a second. Progress on meaningful work. And you're nodding your head as I do as well, because that makes sense. When we move forward on a meaningful project, everything just feels good about the day, doesn't it? I mean, you and we could sit here and churn through 100 emails, but it's, you don't feel that good at the end of the day. And that's what OKRs can do for you. When you write a good, effective OKR that signals your contribution to the company, and of course, you don't write an OKR with a key result that you're going to work on a year from now. Hopefully you're making progress throughout that quarter or whatever your cadence is. So you have the chance to show progress on meaningful work. And again, I think that's not a highly touted benefit of OKRs, but I think it's, John Doerr talks about OKR superpowers. I think that's a hidden superpower, right?
Absolutely,
the chance to show progress on meaningful work.
Because we actually started on an OKR journey in terms of implementing in our company ourselves. And then we are looking at, okay, these are challenges, and we know that we are monitoring our performance based on the company goals. I could see how customers can face the challenges, or what kind of challenge they would face when they implement OKR. Now, is there a way where all the levels, all the employees, whether it's a low level or mid level, will they be fully involved in OKR, or will they be able to understand how OKR works? And do you think that visibility of what are the company objectives flows through the organization?
Yeah, I think so. Again, for OKRs to work well, and if you want to connect from top to bottom, it really starts with the executive team, the leadership of the company. This is one of the most distressing statistics I've come across in my research, but only about 10% of organizations effectively execute their strategies. So why is that? If you dig a little deeper, you find that there's a lot of research that backs up what I'm about to say. Only about 5% of the typical workforce understands the strategy. And we see this with our clients all the time. They share this statistics like that with us. So we have to start right there. So to succeed with OKRs, you have to go way back and say, okay, what is our company's strategy? And then you have to communicate that so everybody understands it. Just getting across that hurdle is enormous. And then once you do that, of course, you have to have, everybody can have OKRs, but it's not a matter, and this is the fact that OKRs are a simple methodology is a kind of a double-edged sword, because sure, it's easy to implement, but that doesn't mean it should be done simplistically. You need to have conversations throughout the organization, so that if I report to you, Raghu, for example, I would share my OKRs in the context of the company's strategy. I would see how I fit in. So OKRs can be tremendously effective for teams and individuals as long as the company has done the work of developing a strategy, communicating it, and ensuring these conversations are taking place throughout the organization. You read a lot about OKRs really fostering strategic conversations, but again, we see a lot of organizations falling short of that, and that's where OKRs can really break down, when they have people create OKRs in a vacuum without that strategic context. So it can be extremely effective for teams and individuals, even at the tactical level, but you have to have those prerequisites in place that I talked about. And
when you're looking at company size, large, small, so are there, is it something like, hey, OKRs should be done only for companies of certain size, are there anything like that? Or you say anybody who runs a business can use OKR, can implement OKR?
Sure. Well, I just talked about the importance of strategy, and every company in the world, whether you're a small startup of 5 people or you're Google, you need some form of strategy, right? So, what is our plan for, overcoming our competition and winning in our markets? You need that. And so by that yardstick, every organization in the world could have OKRs, because you need a means to execute. And so we have not seen, we've got clients against startups, but we've got Fortune 50 companies, government agencies, nonprofit. There's really no problem. It's really not industry specific. When we see organizations succeeding or having challenges with OKRs, it always comes down to what I call the soft things. And what I mean by soft things are like executive support that I talked about. Do executives understand? Do they have a guiding rationale for OKRs? Has the company provided training on OKR so everybody understands how the model works? Is there a champion in place and a group of ambassadors? So it's always the change management aspect that tends to trip it up. But no, but to answer your question, we don't see any industry specific barriers. All organizations, all sizes can benefit from OKRs when done well.
So since you started talking about OKR, observing it, how companies implement it, have you seen any changes or it just remains the same? I mean, in terms of what's there for OKR in the future, how is it kind of, you can say, morphed into something different? I mean, just one level up to think you're taking there.
Sure. Well, that's one of the fun things about my job is that this is not a static model, and that's why I love working in this arena. Of course, we're learning more about, organizations have been around for hundreds of years, but we're learning how to manage better all the time, and this is changing as well. A couple of big trends I'm seeing with OKRs. Number one is cadence. So, when OKRs really hit the vanguard and became very popular, it was just assumed that you would operate on a 90-day, so a quarterly cadence. But we have clients challenging that. It doesn't work for every client because maybe they have a seasonal or cyclical business, or maybe it's a school district that operates on a school year. It could be anything. Right now, we have clients that are using 4-month periods that they call trimesters. We've got clients that use 6-month periods. Anything beyond that is probably a little bit too much, but I really like that people are challenging that assumption, saying, what is the right cadence for us? And if you're in a business or an industry that's moving very, very quickly, maybe even monthly, it's possible. So you have to match the cadence of your OKRs to the industry you're in and the culture that you have, all sorts of factors. So I think that's one. Have you seen that as well in your work?
Yeah. So I think our biggest challenge was getting clarity. So one thing we found was when you start the OKR, when implementing OKR, the first thing we need to what do you want to do? The clarity brings that clarity, and then once the clarity is there, we are able to break it down into 2-3 parts in terms of this marketing. Since I had the marketing, what am I going to do the next 90 days? And we actually were kind of debating, should it be 90 days or 60 days, or even or 6 months. So, and then we realized maybe 6 months too long. Let's go with the accepted rule of 90. But then if things have to change, we can always extend it to 6 months. So, it's once the business is more predictable. So we were having these conversations, and I think it really helped in at least get the ball rolling so that we know, okay, this 3 months we are here, but okay, we overestimated this part of the function. Maybe next quarter when we do it, we need to know how can we push it further, or are we realistic in our goals? So it kind of needed those kind of conversations in the company, I think, which we probably didn't do as often as we wanted. So I think that way definitely was a huge thing for us.
I think that's a really good tip for all of your listeners today too, is that I always tell my clients, in finance, that we have generally accepting accounting principles. Virtually every company in the world has to adhere to these rules. That should not be the case with OKRs. You should use the model and customize it to fit your circumstances. As you said, you might start with 90-day periods and extend it to 6 months if that's appropriate. So good. Yeah. The second trend I wanted to talk about briefly this is a very interesting one too, Raghu. If you look at all the literature around OKRs, it's very clear that you would never link it to incentive compensation. The idea, of course, is that employees or teams might sandbag, which means setting artificially low targets to achieve their bonus. What's fascinating to me is, and you mentioned this in your introduction, I have a background as well in balanced scorecard, which, without getting into too much of the details, OKRs and balanced scorecards share a lot of the same traits. They're fairly similar frameworks. Of course, there are some differences. But in the balanced scorecard world, it's not even a question of if you would link to incentive compensation, it's when. It was always assumed, which is very interesting. With OKRs, it's the opposite. And I'm seeing organizations now question that and think, maybe could there be a link? And, again, my personal opinion here is that sandbagging argument is not really warranted because, and here's why. Again, when you create OKRs, it shouldn't be, again, let's say I report to you. I'm not going to submit my OKRs to you and you would just rubber stamp them and say, these are good. We should be having a conversation. And if we're having that conversation, which of course is a key part of the OKR process, you should be able, as my manager or the person I report to, say, Paul, I don't think you're stretching yourself here, or what is your rationale for this target? Why did you choose it? And you know, if I'm fooling you, well, that's kind of shame on you, right? And so I'm sorry to pick on you here, but it could be the same thing with me.
Yeah.
But the idea is if we're having realistic conversations about this, then I think you can overcome that challenge of sandbagging. And when you think about it, what we're doing with OKRs is asking people for exceptional performance, right?
Right.
OKRs are not about business as usual tasks. It's about, you know, 10x improvements and things. So if we're putting this expectation on people, shouldn't they be rewarded? So this is a very interesting and evolving field. I'm very anxious to see what's going to happen in the next year or two around incentive compensation and OKRs.
I think it also promotes accountability, right? So it's not just me being accountable, my boss is accountable and his boss is accountable, right? So I think that's why I see that there's accountability through the chain. It's not that, you know, hey, my job is done and that's, you know, it's not. So I think that way, I think OKR was a revelation when we started looking at it. So. Okay, great. Thanks, Paul. I mean, it's amazing conversation, right? So a lot of insights from you, and thanks for taking time joining us. This is another episode of Synergita Talentcast. Until next time, be safe. Bye-bye.
Thank you.